Spoilers ahead for MoonKnight. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the accent. I'm just gonna let myself laugh and
Go on, do it.
Hello, you donuts! Today, Brad and I are here today, once again, into the reflective surface of MoonKnight. I don't know if it works, but I'm just going to keep going with it. But before we do, guys, remember to pop over to our website, thescriptdepartment.net, check out our global network of screenwriters, what they're up to, and feel free to go backwards in time, check out our other conversations, including MoonKnight Episode 1, which was up recently. Brad, Episode 2, we've just arrived in Egypt, but before we get there, what do you think of the process of finally arriving in the sands of Egypt, Brad?
Again, good episode. The first one was good, second one was good, very different. I thought they were very, very different. It sort of felt like it turned more into a sort of format we know for Marvel. You know, there was a kind of a mission to follow. There was a bit of action. We learned a bit more about the protagonist and antagonist. You know, the sort of less mystery. Of course, we can't have mystery like all the way through because no one know what was going on. But I think, as we said in Ep 1, there was something really almost like magical about it. That there was this little puzzle that we all of us, like the antagonist, the protagonist, the audience, everyone needed to solve. And I really liked that. So there's still a little bit of that in Ep 2, but it's more of a bit of a well-trodden actioner sort of format that we're used to with Marvel.
Sure, it does feel as though we're getting back into that there. It definitely felt like, because we said about Episode 1, it's felt like very much a first act kind of job. I think this feels like the conclusion of that first act. It feels as though we're coming up on that now. We've got him. We've learned a little bit more about what's going on. We've established the rules. We've established the ground, the kind of the law, as it were. And now we're ready to go into Egypt and to kind of discover a few things in the future. So yeah, but it was very different. And I think the thing that grabbed me most about this is how much, from a character point of view, I think I'd assumed that Mark Spector was just kind of popping up during the evenings and going off and doing this, that, and the other. But you know, he was very much playing second fiddle to Stephen's main life. But now it turns out he has a wife. He has seemingly an entire life that is entirely separate from Stephen's. And apart from trying to work out the logistics of that, it's quite an interesting thing for Stephen. Imagine realizing that your body had been used in there. I think there are some implications there beyond the kind of been used for destruction, been used in marriage as well. It's kind of an interesting thing for the character.
Yeah, I think there was again, that's where the mystery remains around who is the prime, owner of that body. Is the one of the always split? Was it Mark and it became Stephen? Because there's some quite interesting stuff where the police, not police, whisk him away and do a quick checkup. I don't know why that's a bit expositional for my liking. It's like they know who he is. They've just come to kidnap him.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are they doing a checkup in front of him?
Yeah.
They go, oh look, he was Black Ops in Egypt and blah 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 blah. And that wasn't there for no reason. For me, maybe that was where he met. Oh goodness, I forgot the name of the deity. Met the Khonshu for the first time, and. He says he's got a debt to pay to him. Maybe they did something in Egypt. I mean, I haven't read the comic purposely, so I don't know what's going on there. I learnt my lesson with The Walking Dead. As many people learn many lessons from The Walking Dead, but I knew so far ahead about who was going to die. And, So that I've tried to keep away from the comics entirely, so I can come at this cold. So I don't know how he meets his sort of Egyptian god. Well, I guess he's almost possessed him, I guess, hasn't he? So. It's quite an unusual relationship. The way that Khonshu, he's got a hold over him and he's keeping the body and he's threatening to take his wife as the next avatar. But it's those little mysteries in there. I think it's quite interesting, and the idea, even straight away in episode 2, we're questioning, or it's been designed for us to question who's the real bad guy.
Absolutely.
So of course it's Harrow. Harrow's the real bad guy, but we have the scene where he's trying to romance him into becoming part of the cult, which seems lovely on the face of it. It's just like a really nice place to live.
Here's this place that used to be this terrible kind of crime pit and things like this, but now look, we have lentil soup. Isn't this delightful? Come and sit down and have some of our lentil soup.
I live in Stroud. It's basically Stroud. I live in Stroud. I basically live there. It's all very lovely now. But yeah, it's interesting what they're doing with that. They're making you question lots of things on the same level as probably Stephen more than anyone else, and I like that.
Yeah, I think for sure there's just enough mystery left over, I think, there to keep it going. But that it's interesting you mentioned the kind of that romancing section there. It felt very deliberately placed. And I really like the fact, because there was a moment there where Ethan Hawke's talking about it, and you kind of have it's Minority Report vibes, isn't it? The kind of the justice before the event, and there was a moment that I was sitting there thinking, sounds interesting. Like it's so I see the logic here. This is interesting. And then you get Stephen sat there going, I mean, are you all into killing babies? Because I draw the line on that one. And he starts kind of going down that route. And I think it was such a well-designed scene from a kind of structural point of view and everything, because I think you definitely see him being seduced by that. And you see him kind of, and I think as an audience, we're supposed to sort of probably feel a little bit sucked into that. You know this is the bad guy, and the music's telling you it's the bad guy, and you know it's a bad plan. But for the protagonist to lay out the reason why this is bad, rather than just assuming everyone else, and perhaps they've learnt their lesson from the Thanos is right nonsense that went around. I don't know. Maybe that's. I
was going to say it's very Thanos-y, like the way that he does it, and there's a period where Stephen's drinking the Kool-Aid or the lentil soup in this case. And he's, the way that he's explaining it, it's like, oh, he obviously believes he's doing the right thing, which is, as with Thanos, that was supposed to be the most terrifying part of their persona. They don't think they're doing wrong. They think they're doing this for the benefit of everyone. And whether we don't necessarily know that about Harrow yet, but I mean, he's got a lot of skeletons coming out the cupboard that he was possibly MoonKnight before Stephen.
Yeah.
Well, he used to be the Avatar. I don't know whether he must have been the same.
I guess,
the same kind of thing. Yeah,
and wearing the same clothes as this guy.
Yeah, so that used to be my suit. But it's how he knows about everything, and I like that. I've forgotten his name again. I can't get his name in my head. Khonshu. I like that Khonshu is hanging out in the background, and Harrow knows he's there. He's like, he's there now, isn't he? I bet you he's saying, "I am justice."
I am justice.
He knows all about it, and it's funny, and he comes across annoyed. He's a lot less godlike in those moments.
For sure.
And you can see. I mean, Khonshu's got that massive face, very scary to look at. He's like 8, 9, 10 feet tall or something.
And
just the fact he's just off in a balcony going, "No, I am justice." And it's like, oh, he's throwing a wobbler again.
He stamps his staff, I think. It's almost like he's stamping his feet like, "No, I am the justice around here." It's like, it's a little bit different to Batman, isn't it? Going, "I am vengeance." No, I am vengeance around here.
Yeah,
yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
But it does somewhat sort of defang him, I think, which is a big. That moment where Ethan Hawke's character says, "That's all he can do. That's all he can do without you. He can't do anything else." And we've just had that big sort of that really, really intense sequence in the storage place with the lights and the flashing, which was just so great. Really, really loved that sequence. And it's really, really scary. It's really, really scary. And then Harrow comes in and just completely undercuts him. Just says, no, he's fine. He's nothing to be worried about. And it puts the power back into Mark, really, but into Stephen as well, as we see him kind of beginning to find his power. it puts it back. Yeah, it puts the power back into him, which is interesting because then Mark makes a. I think Conchu. Is that's
Yeah,
Conchu? Yeah,
we've
I
decided
think
that's his
we've
name.
decided that's his name. Good for us. I'm proud of us. I think he. I think he actually says later on. I will, or perhaps in the previous episode, I'll kill you both if you don't do this, that, and the other. But then Harrow's saying he can't do anything other than kind of blow the wind around and things like that. So how much bluster is this guy, and why is Mark seemingly so concerned about him, other than the fact that he wants to take his wife as the next avatar if Mark backs away?
Yeah,
It's an interesting.
I think there's some interesting stuff in the way that Harrow, questions Khonshu's character and his temperament, and says that's why he's banished. So he would have been, in the same realm as people at one point, and now he's not. He's in another realm, an afterlife, or wherever he is. We might find that out. And he needs an avatar, but we also find out that there's another one that also needs an avatar, which is the sort of head of the scales, Amit, and she's sort of like that again. She's the Minority Report god, I guess.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
the
yeah.
one who wants to wipe out everyone before they commit a crime, whether it's in the future, whether they've already done it, whether they're a child or not. And he's trying to wake her. And the very fact he used to be an avatar, then he wants to be. Then he got. It feels like it didn't end very well. I'm surprised
Got
that he's
sacked,
alive.
yeah.
He got
Yeah.
he got sacked by Khonshu.
Yeah, yeah.
And now he's hell bent on becoming an avatar for Amit, and it's you definitely that's not a great idea. Just the fact that people are dropping dead all over the shop as soon as he touches them and the scales tip the wrong direction.
Well, he says when speaking about Conchu at one point, he says that's you can. He says, "Oh, you can see. Can you see him?" And Harris says that's an honor I no longer have. So he's kind of in one hand he's saying he's not respected by any of the gods, and he's all talk and whatnot. But on the other hand, he still is giving him respect, and he's still saying, I no longer have the honor of that. But I don't know. Perhaps it was a disingenuous comment, but it's interesting. It feels to me as if he's a person who has been robbed of power, who is desperately trying to get power once again. And that feels like his arc. And he even says when he's holding his staff. The god staff, I suppose, but this is just a small taste of the power, and that looks like a pretty big chunk of power to me. It's you've got a big jackal thing running around all over the shop, and so even then he's still saying this power isn't enough for me. I still want more, and all this, that, and the other. He for me is definitely the standout of this in terms of characterization so far, and because there is something so chilling about Ethan Hawke's portrayal, and I think it is the villain who believes he's right sort of vibe. We've sort of spoken about before with him, but I don't know. I'm sort of fascinated by this guy.
He's in control.
Mm.
He's a madman in control of his faculties, which is a madman with power in control of his faculties, which is terrifying.
Which is actually the direct antithesis of Stephen, isn't it? He's out of control, and so you have that kind and the stoicism of Ethan Hawke against the kind of manic, fractured sort of vibe of Stephen. Sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah.
It's a great point, because I was going to say about the how they've now been knitted together, the antagonist and the protagonist. They're opposites at times, depending who's in control of the MoonKnight body, or the avatar, as I guess we can call it now. They are now knitted together. He's the former avatar of Khonshu. He's the current avatar of Khonshu. They both have a vested interest in the scarab. It's all they're all tied together in one thing. It's like they're a different version of one another, literally a different version of one another, because he was MoonKnight first. And it's really interesting how they've done that, and I think it's going to prove to be quite exciting. As we climax.
Yeah, I think it's. I guess the question I would have is, are we retreading this ground with Marvel again? Because what we've got here is another antagonist who is the direct opposite of, you think back to Red Skull, Captain America, I forget the original name of the Iron Man's jobby. What's his name in the first Iron Man? He builds his own suit. Obadiah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Obadiah, yeah.
yeah. He builds his own suit. The Hulk faces off against blah 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 ad infinitum. We always do this. We always have the opposite. Is this, do you think, a clever spin on that formula, or are we just doing the same thing again? And it's just sort of, it's got a bit of sand on it, so we can't see it as clearly.
I think we'll end up there. I think we're pointing towards it, but we're going to see the journey that gets us there, which we normally do. But this is going to be over a number of episodes. So I think, it's only 6, but they're 45 to an hour long, right? It's like little films every time we get an episode. But there's no way we're going to have this whole threat of Amit and him becoming the Avatar and it not happen. So whether it happens last episode or the penultimate episode, it's up for grabs. But we're going to see the journey of how they become complete opposites and equals, possibly. And it's quite interesting to figure out who is going to be the equal of Amit's Avatar. Is it going to be Steven? It's probably not. It's probably going to be Mark. But Mark says, as soon as we've dealt with this, I'll be gone forever. And what does that mean? Like, because they can't split the body in half. Well, you can split a body in half, but they're not going to want to do that.
No one's walking around after that, though. Maybe a bit of hopping, but unlikely.
Because we know from seeing Steven in the mirror world that it's not nice. He's like, this is terrifying. I hate it, and you really feel for the guy because he's like a defenseless, quite an innocent, seems kind-hearted person wrapped up in this. He can't handle it. Even when he turns into Mr. Knight in his suit, which there's a lot of chatter about that online. There's a lot of the fans are not happy because it's very different to the comic, apparently. So when he turns into Mr. Knight, he's still not, he's still a little bit defenseless. He gets a punch in on the jackal, but he needs help.
Yeah, I suppose I wonder if we're going to head in a kind of a Professor Hulk sort of direction here, and we end up sort of bringing those two sides together, because presumably that's got to be the end game of this. Presumably would be because you can't have it would. I refuse to believe it would make any sense to bring another character into the MCU that is mild-mannered when in one form and then destructive superhero in another form. I just don't think they do that, because we already have She-Hulk on the way as well, so that would then become 3. I don't know. I just don't think they're going to do that. And with the kind of emphasis on mental health and things like that, the kind of end game there, pardon the pun, would be to bring together and heal the mind into one form. And so perhaps, is this a coming of age story for Stephen? Perhaps it's him realizing the power he has within and bringing, perhaps he can absorb Mark's memories and become one individual, one whole, healthy, badass individual.
Is he going to become Neven or Stark, though, is the question.
Is he going to, what's your what?
Is he going to end up being Meven or Stark, as in Stephen and Mark put together?
You confused me by saying Stark.
Where's he going to Stark? Yeah, maybe it's an origin story. We don't know.
Maybe this is Iron Knight, the beginnings of Iron Knight, and he's going to have his Iron Man just wrapped in toilet paper. That would be I'd watch that.
It's an interesting thing to try and figure out who's going to get the body, if either of them are going to get the body. Like, are they both personalities that aren't the prime personality of that, of the character? But it's going to be interesting watching it.
Yeah, for sure. The mother element of this is really, really intriguing me, because we never hear her in that first episode. She is just an answer phone. Right. So they're just an answer phone on the end of the thing, and he's just talking to the answer phone, leaving messages. We never hear her call back. And then Mark's wife, then in this episode 2, when Stephen mentions, "Oh, this is my mum's place," then she says, "Oh, so you're talking to your mum again then?" And he kind of stops and takes it's a very deliberate pause there. So I wonder if you're right. I wonder if there is a third personality hidden away in there, someone who is perhaps the actual owner of the body, and maybe that's the person, and perhaps Stephen's memories are all figments of, he doesn't actually remember his mum. He thinks he remembers his mum, but he doesn't actually remember his mum. He doesn't know who he's calling. He doesn't know who he's talking to. And what else? I'm dropping things. What else is there? Going on inside his brain, and how many other personalities could assert themselves? Perhaps there's an evil Dark Knight, possibly a little bit on the nose, that could emerge itself there and take over the body, and maybe that's a series 2. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that jarred with me in this episode was Layla's response to Stephen. So he runs out of the self-storage facility and then falls on the floor. And it's like, "How did you find me?" "Oh, I tracked your phone." It's like, okay, at least that explains that weird plot hole. She just appeared when he ran at the door.
Yeah, I hate that. And it's, I hate that. It's nonsense.
But the whole thing of her not understanding who Stephen is, and she's like, no, you're Mark. What are you talking about? Here's the divorce papers. Stop playing around. And then when she sees him the second time, she's like, summon the suit. So she knows about the inner working. He's got like an Egyptian god inside of him. Like what? I don't understand that she wouldn't get that there would be a possibility. Like she just shuts it down. She's like, "No way, you're having me on." Like it's just unusual about how that felt. All of a sudden, she's in.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen, right. Is it? Yeah, you, Steve, you could call the suit. And it's just like, well, no, hang on. That felt quick. That felt a bit rushed.
I totally agree. It felt like a really underdeveloped point in that, because you kind of, I mean, like you say, you just jump from complete denial of this whole thing, and suddenly she's like, yeah, okay, yeah, and there's a moment at the end. There's a moment at the end where she says, "Stephen, I know you can do this. Also, is she American? Is she English? Is she Irish?
I don't know.
What's going on?"
There's an interesting accent.
Yeah, it's just a show of bizarre accent choices, I think. That are going on. Anyway,
she's quite intriguing character. She's quite interesting. Yeah. And she's pretty tough as well. She kicks the crap out of some of those security guards. It's like, oh wow, she's nails. It's really hard. But I think it's probably more of that whole conversation between the two of them. You're Mark. You're not Stephen. That proved. I think, just thinking about it now, probably just to be a vessel for more information about their relationship. So like, oh no, here's the things you asked for, the divorce papers you asked for. Do you remember all the fighting we did? How dare you? You're trying to sew in some of the past, because she could have just easily turned up going, oh, the idiot's in control again.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and it would have been, everyone's on board. You don't have to do too much work. Yeah. It's all good. But yeah, I think it was potentially a vehicle to tell us more information about their relationship.
I think it has to be, because the introduction of her as a character, it'll be interesting to see what because now we're with Mark. Yeah, like we're in Egypt now. We're hitting Act 2 of the overall story, and we're in Egypt, and we're going on to do this thing. And I wonder, because we don't see her as she drives off on her scooter. We don't see her kind of with him. We don't know where he is, and he seems to be kind of wanting to separate himself from her at all costs, for safety's sake and all this, that, and the other. So, I wonder how she will be involved as we move through the story, and what it will do, and whether, I really hope they don't fall into this trap of sort of making her an annoying love interest that pops up to remind him of, I don't know, his own morality and things like that, and as just a foil for the character, because she's better than that. And I think that they're already kind of navigating that better, because Khonshu is it seems to be interested in her as an avatar, so she has some agency of her own there, and things like that. But I don't know. There are alarm bells ringing. There's something going off in my head there, which is be careful with the way this is handled, because it feels like it could go a bit wrong.
Yeah, I think I'd be pretty disappointed if they turned her into a prize for the men. It would be. You can see they've already shown that Stephen likes her, mainly because she's a woman that talks to him. But she already shown that Stephen likes her. He's like, what? You're my wife, and he's
I
quite
would never
touched
divorce
by the
you.
fact. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're amazing. He's got all that going on, and then it could easily be one of those stories where it's like, oh, Mark comes back. What, you slept with him and you slept with Stephen? How dare you? And it's just like, no, that's not the story that we need right now. That isn't it. But they could be giving us a assumed narrative of that story. They could be showing us these things. I mean, they've done it before in Marvel. They've sort of tried to. I mean, particularly with more experimental stuff like WandaVision, where they gave us a number of stories that were something else. Particularly with like the Quicksilver character and all that kind of stuff. That was brilliant. How it's like, oh, it's Quicksilver. Oh no, it's not. Oh, it's the wrong guy. Oh no, it's just a guy that lives in his garage. And it was just, the whole how they did that was like great. I really enjoyed that. I felt like you'd lied to me, but I didn't really hate it.
Oh,
like
man.
I was like, oh, you tricked me, but it was okay because it was good. And I wonder if they're doing that with the with Layla's character in this. I hope they are, rather than treading the same path they've trodden many other times.
Absolutely. I think that it's proving to be a pretty competently worked out show so far, and I think one of the most engaging of the new kind of Marvel select that I've come across. I actually watched this twice because I was kind of quite enamored with this one, and wanted to see it again, make sure that it feels very, very well put together, very well structured, etc., etc., etc. And so I think that we can hopefully trust that they won't go down that route, but it does concern me. There is one thing that kind of jumped out at me about this, and one of those things was the dialogue. There was a moment there, and it's actually specifically the dialogue written for English accents, and this is a problem. And I haven't checked, actually. I haven't looked to see who the writer for this was, and if they are, what nationality they are, or anything like that. But it did stand out to me. There were a few occasions where it sounded like American words put into an English mouth, and it really, and I'm really, I don't know why I'm quite sensitive to that kind of thing, because it can often sound really, really stupid. Someone at some point, the detective, the not police officer, says, "We're going to take you away, son." And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
God, you just wouldn't. That's just not wouldn't come out of someone's mouth, in that situation, in that scenario. And you could tell the actor wasn't comfortable and didn't really know why. And it just takes you out of the world. I felt a little bit turned off by that this time around.
I think it's hard, like the dialogue thing, particularly because he's an American guy playing an American guy with a British side guy inside of him. It's that alone is hard, but I think the writing of it's there's so many pitfalls in changing the same language to a different country's version of that language. I'm currently writing something as a English British speaker in American in New York. And the amount of times I've gone back over the dialogue and gone, and I have to read it out to myself in my terrible American accent just to try and hear it. And I'm like, no, there's too many words in there. I need to strip that back. And to do that for 6 1-hour episodes, it's hard, man. Like I know they're gonna have some of the best writers in the world. They've got a lot of money, but it's tough, particularly if it's American guys writing an American guy with an English guy inside of them. It's gonna be hard. Even if it's an English guy writing the English guy in an American writer's room, could still be hard, because people are all going to be picking at bits, particularly the showrunner and people like that. They're going to sign off dialogue exchanges and things like that, and it's going to be a hard task. It's going to be
for
hard.
sure. And I think that by and large they do rise to it. I think that there were just a couple of occasions, and I'm nitpicking. I'm deliberately nitpicking as well for the sake of kind of giving a balanced look at this. But there are a few occasions where it stands out. But I think generally speaking they do rise to it. And you're right. It's so tough because the other side of that is I think that they occasionally pander to stereotype and again, not in a terrible way or anything like that, but there are a few occasions where there is a little bit of pandering to what you can almost hear an American thinking a British stereotyped person would be. So it can kind of go either way, but I think generally speaking, they probably do rise to that reasonably well. I think.
There's a few colloquialisms in there that are just great. Latest Gators, obviously, but there
Oh
are a
yeah,
few
my
in there.
favorite.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, they've really done. So they've tried to really do something there. Like the way that his language is very parochial to like London. It's very Londony, and it's like, oh yeah, I can hear. Yeah, I can hear that. There are other times where
Wagwan,
it's like,
wagwan,
yeah, like that.
wagwan.
But that was so smart because that's 10 years ago, right? If not more. Like the whole white people using that phrase is because of like Ali G and stuff, and it became like this weird thing that happened. And for him to do it now just makes you feel like he's like this nerdy behind the
Yeah,
times. Like it's funny. It is
it's
funny.
it is that is a perfect character moment. Yeah, you're right. It really is one of those. It is, yeah, it's great. I love that. Yeah. The other thing that really kind of jumped out to me on this one is the de-marveling of this Marvel property, and we spoke about it last time. Again, we've run through an episode with next to no greater kind of Marvel Universe references. And interestingly, I actually almost found it a distraction this time around. Whereas before, last time, I thought it was a good call and everything, and yep, let's start off like this. I think that I think there was a book on the side that said Asgard on it and Wakanda, I think, but so that it's there in the fine details, but nothing at all in the dialogue. And there was a moment there where he says right at the top, he's saying to the security guard, "Oh, this is like some MI5 or Area 51 stuff, mate." And I thought, and I was kind of sat there thinking to myself, wouldn't you reference like because in this world the superheroes are what MI5 and Area 51 would be to us, but in this world, in this Marvel universe, who cares about Area 51 anymore? Like you've got gods and aliens and purple aliens literally blipping people out of existence and battling over New York and all this, that, and the other. It's like area where why do we care about that? That, and MI5 as well. Who cares about MI5 when the Avengers and Shield and things like that exist? I appreciate that it's landing it, but the MI5 reference lands it in the UK, and I understand that. I get it, but that cultural bleeding would happen, and I did think to myself that I feel like that is them obviously and not so distancing themselves from the wider universe in a not quite so nuanced way.
Yeah, I think there are no landmarks timeline wise as far as the Marvel timeline is concerned. There's nothing. We don't know when this is. We know it's in the last 5 years because of the phones and cars and whatever else is there. You know, I don't think there's anything to say it's right now. I've got to be honest, I haven't been looking for it, but I don't think there's anything to say that it is today. But it could be today. It could be in 5 years. It could be 5 years ago. Like that is all potentially. But again, Marvel started changing the timeline since the 40s and before that, right? So there's lots of potential for it to cross over. We knew that, and I think they will. I think at the end,
Okay.
because they've done that in a number of other things before, where it's like, in our, how many times did Samuel L. Jackson turn up at the end in an end credits scene in those early days. It was like, hey, we're tying this all together now. This is how it's going to work. Those scenes, we're putting a team together. It's like, okay, that's what they're doing. So I think towards the end of Moon Knight, if not at the end of Moon Knight, it might slot in. But I think they are avoiding that, as you say, purposely. But the scene with the security guard, yes, they could have said, oh God, it's like when Thanos arrived, or whatever else, when the Chintari destroyed New York. Do you remember that? Yeah, that was pretty crazy,
wow,
right?
That was bad, wasn't it, mate?
Yeah. So they could have done that, but I think because the world they're in, there are such fantastical things happening that are beyond the current realm. This is ancient Egyptian gods. I think that's probably enough to hold the attention of the audience, possibly without it having to cross over, because these are fantastical, amazing things that are happening. And I think there are enough of them. I hope there's enough of them to keep us away from that just enough for us to not have to delve into what's going on in the wider universe.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. It's not. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I absolutely see the merit of it being a something that stands alone, and something that and certainly introducing a new character when standing alone, I think is no bad thing at all. I think though that when you set a precedent for in a universe like it is a universe for starters, they've set this precedent early on and said those things, and I found that particular moment. And I'm nitpicking. It's not that big of a deal, but it's one of those things that I did. It took me out of it for a second there. It took me out of it, and I thought, okay, I feel like that's a weird choice. That's a weird choice because the precedent is set that they reference other things going on, and so yeah, I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, and you're quite right. I think it will likely go forward. They did it with Shang-Chi, because I don't think anything was mentioned in Shang-Chi until that post-credit scene with Brie Larson and Mark Ruffalo. I think I'm not sure on that, but I don't think there's certainly nothing major was mentioned from the rest of everything else until then. So I suppose there's precedent for it there as well.
I think there's a few links in there. I think so, far more than we're getting now. Like, this is the most sparsely connected version of it, apart from maybe the two or three first episodes of WandaVision.
Yeah,
it was just like, what is this? What's happening?
But then those connections are because it is Wanda and Vision off of the Avengers. So I suppose it's that you don't need that there in that same way. But yeah. I don't know. Because last week we spoke briefly on cultural appropriation. And everything. So I did, and I cannot emphasize how short my research was on this. I read part of one article, but interestingly, the religion of the ancient Egyptians is still being practiced today, which I didn't know until this moment, because I was thinking about cultural appropriation is always something to be aware of and always important for those there. But I was wondering if this actually is anyone's living culture at this point in time, beyond sort of from a historical point of view. And yeah, it turns out it is. It's not like there is no direct line. This is a rebirth and a revival kind of movement that these that the people practicing this are taking. And it's very small from what I understand, but there are people out there who are currently worshipping these gods in a very real way. So it got me thinking about this in a slightly different way, because could you do something like this with, say, Hinduism or any other kind of polytheistic current active practicing religion? Could you create a Marvel world around that and put superheroes in it and do that without it being a problem? And does it matter? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, though.
Well, spoilers for Eternals, but they kind of had a bit of a crack at it there, didn't they? It was like all of the Icarus and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't necessarily that good. But that's another conversation.
That's another conversation.
I think,
yeah.
But actually, me and John discussed it, and we weren't that. We were quite disparaging of it, and there was something wrong with the recording, so it didn't make it out. So the recording was also so bad. It didn't make it up. It was like it was in the ether that it's bad. So yeah, that was quite a funny.
That is funny
coincidence. But yeah, I think there are there are lots of if you look at American Gods, for example, it wasn't just American gods. It was gods from all over, and gods from history, newer gods. It was fascinating. I still haven't finished the final season. I'm a bit behind on that, but I think the way they brought them in, they modernized them all, but they were still there, and they still investigated it, and it was still really interesting to see how they integrated them into the storyline. It's like, oh yeah, I see that. That's quite interesting. I don't think it was. Some people may have taken some offense with it, but it wasn't intending to do that. It was almost trying to give all of the stories an even approach, an even level of story that went into the development of these characters. So it's not new that this is happening. It's whether and it's definitely not new if they get it wrong. Like there's plenty
That's
of
so true.
Films and TV shows that have just got it so wrong, and it's been it's just stolen the soul of an idea of an entire culture, and they've just thrown it into a character kind of thing, and it's not worked that well. But I think the alarm bells that have been going off for possibly both of us at this moment are from previous experience. So we're like, oh, are they gonna mess this up? But they haven't yet. There hasn't been that many signs of them doing that yet. But we'll see. I think we'll wait and see.
Absolutely. I think that there's a precedent for exploring ancient religions set down by the Norse mythology with Asgard and Thor and all this, that, and the other. That's really interesting. You're right about the Eternals as well. I was so down on the Eternals that I just forgot about it. I totally forgot in that consideration. I just forgot about it entirely. But there are precedents there. So I think it'd be interesting to wait and see. But yeah, MoonKnight series episode 2. Thumbs up from me. Thumbs up from you.
Yeah, 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up.
No, thumb and a half. Thumb and a half.
Thumb and a half. Oh,
yeah.
Ooh. That's tricky. Nice one. Thank you, Brad. That was fun.
Cheers.
Anybody wanting to go and see it if you haven't seen it, I mean, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing watching this anyway? But it's available on Disney Plus. They'll continue to come out there. And yeah, we'll be back next week to discuss episode 3. I have no doubt. And until then, feel free to like, share, subscribe, check out the previous stuff. As I say before, and until next week, laters, Gators.